let's go ahead and get looking at 46th President of the U.S., Biden.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure, isolate, and punish China. Donald Trump thinks healthcare is a privilege. Barack and I think it's a right for people to have bad healthcare. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Sounds corny. Not a joke. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. PP.
What do you think President Trump in place of that? Do you think he plays as a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a.
All right, so first, let me go ahead and throw this out there. Obviously, I think to the people that watch this show know that that was a doctored video with the clips of Steve Carell from Bruce Almighty. But for those that don't know that or want to call it a doctored video, altered video, misinformation, it was altered, obviously. So those were clips of Joe Biden, some of his gaffes. In fact, the clips I used, and I'm not super duper proud of it, but the clips I used of him gaffing, a lot of those were taken from a show that I do watch on a regular basis here on YouTube called Don't Walk Run Productions. Really, really like that channel. Really, really, really like the sarcasm and the humor there. So I will have a link to the show in the description notes below that I borrowed some of those clips for. He already had them all in one place. And so, you know, if I'm using somebody else's stuff, I definitely want to make sure I give him credit. But yeah, some of the footage from the gaffes were from him. So go check him out, give him a like and share also. But yeah, so that was Biden. You know, he's had plenty of more gaffes. I didn't really want to get into that too much, but obviously one of the hot topics right now was the hot mic that just recently occurred. We'll jump over here and check out what, you know, some of the news has to say about it. All right. So over here at Yahoo News on hot mic, Biden appears to call Fox News reporter stupid son of a. Well, he did. It wasn't appears to. Go away. All right. President Biden was caught on a hot mic Monday, appearing to call Fox News reporter Peter Doocy a stupid SOB in response to a question asked at the start of the White House event on lowering prices of consumer goods. As the meeting at the White House wrapped up, a reporter asked the president for an update on a call held earlier in the day on the situation in Ukraine, which we'll get to in a little bit. Biden seemed impatient that the question had veered off the topic of the meeting. The only reason I don't like doing this is that you never report on why I called a meeting, and this is really important. I had a very, very, very good meeting. Total unanimity with all the European leaders. We'll talk about it later, Biden told the reporter. Thank you. Another reporter then proceeded to shout out a question about a Pentagon plan to possibly send up to 8,500 U.S. troops to Eastern Europe in anticipation of a Russian incursion in Ukraine. Biden ignored that question, and the reporters were in the process of being escorted from the room when Doocy yelled, "Do you think inflation is a political liability in the midterms?" And then Biden said, "That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid SOB." And it says it's the second time in a week that Biden was heard criticizing a question posed to him by a Fox News reporter, and it goes on and on. As I always say, don't forget, I'm not going to read every little bit of these articles. You can read them yourself if you're interested. Make sure that I'm not taking things out of context, and I'm not overlooking things, or maybe you just get a different feel from it, different perception of what's being told. And all those articles that we'll be using will have links in the description, every single one of them. So you can fact check me on everything. You can read behind me, and I do encourage you to do so. And if I ever do anything wrong, please feel free to point out. I had a comment earlier from somebody in a previous video that kind of questioned something I was saying or pointing out, but I think it was really something that was read that someone else was saying, and of course I tried to clear that up, so I'm hoping I did a good job in that. And again, I'm not perfect. I'm neither far right or far left. You know, I like to think I'm somewhere in the middle. I probably lean more right than anything, granted. But I have several views that lean to the left, and I'm not ashamed of that. I like to think I'm a little bit more balanced than definitely a lot of the mainstream media. So yeah. So if you do have the time and you want to, go check out those links. They're there for you. Let's continue reading. So we're looking at Biden. Here at the AP, it says, explainer, why are oil prices high and any relief in sight? So the question was about inflation that Ducey got yelled at, right? Well, inflation is a big thing, and that's why he was probably being asked. It says here, anyone who's bought food, paid rent, or looked for a used car recently has come up against the billowing inflation that has engulfed the U.S. economy. And with surging oil prices keeping gasoline high, so has anyone who's filled up a car. Energy costs have been one of the main drivers of what's become the highest inflation in a generation. In recent days, the price of a barrel of U.S. benchmark crude oil hit a 7-year high at $87 a barrel, a dizzying jump of about 36% since December. Again, you can continue reading. One of the things I always chuckle at is the Biden administration. I know Psaki, she'll get out there, or a psaki, however you say it. And she'll say that one of the reasons the cost of gas is so high is because so many people are driving now than had before, because there's so many more people out there on the road. It's not the case, as we're going to see here in just a little bit. But yeah, so gas prices are going up. If you are out there filling up your car, you're feeling it. You know it. Grocery prices are going up. Inflation's a real thing. Let's keep reading. Over here, we've got Biden signals radical shift from Trump era with executive orders on climate change. So this is the older article that kind of sets that up. All right, so we're talking about inflation. We're talking about gas prices. So one of the things he did when he came into office was he's going to tackle climate change. He's going to get rid of a lot of the Trump stuff, overturn it, reroute it, flip it, reverse it, whatever. So let's look at this. It says Joe Biden has warned the climate crisis poses an existential threat to the world as he unveiled radical change in the direction from the Trump era by halting fossil fuel activity on public lands and directing the U.S. government to start a full frontal effort to lower planet heating emissions. We have already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer, the U.S. president said as he signed a battery of executive orders on Wednesday. We see it with our own eyes. We feel it in our own bones. It's time to act. Biden's instructing the U.S. government to pause and review all oil, gas, and drilling on federal land, eliminate fossil fuel subsidies, and transform the government's vast fleet of cars and trucks into electric vehicles in a sweeping new set of climate executive orders. We desperately need a unified national response to the climate crisis because there is a climate crisis, Biden said. Let's keep going. Who's this? Politico. I'm not happy about it. Dems torch Biden's Russian pipeline deal. So stay with me. I know sometimes I kind of get long-winded here, but I am building a case again of what we're looking at here. So where are we getting our oil from? What's going on with the oil prices? Why is the cost going up? What's the difference between Biden and Trump as far as fuel goes? So stick with me, kind of hitting all these hot spots here. President Joe Biden is facing bipartisan backlash to his administration's agreement with Germany that allows a controversial Russian natural gas pipeline to be completed. President Joe Biden is facing bipartisan backlash to his administration's agreement with Germany that allows a controversial Russian natural gas pipeline to be completed, arguing that the deal is a boon to Moscow at the expense of Ukraine. Biden and his deputies have long been at odds with members of Congress on the pipeline, known as Nord Stream 2, the lawmakers overwhelmingly approving a slate of mandatory sanctions aimed at crippling the pipeline over geopolitical and environmental concerns. The president waived many of those sanctions earlier this year as part of his broader efforts to repair transatlantic alliances with the countries like Germany, which has been pushing for Nord Stream 2 to be completed. And on Wednesday, the U.S. and Germany announced a deal aimed at mollifying Ukraine, which stands to lose the most from the pipeline's completion. All right, so you hear this. So Ukraine stands to lose, Germany stands to win, and this is... It allows it's a Russian natural gas pipeline. Russian natural gas pipeline working with Germany, Ukraine stands to lose. Okay. And before that, I kind of hinted to it in that article, I think. And then what happened here? What did we do in the U.S.? Well, part of that climate change that he pushed, and part of that climate change that, executive orders that he was putting out there and undoing what Trump did, was a Keystone Pipeline. Now, I know, granted, we were not looking at a lot of fuel from Keystone Pipeline, but from my understanding of what I've read, some fuel from the Keystone Pipeline would have been coming into America, whereas a lot of it would have been shipped out. But even more so, a lot of jobs were lost. And that's really the big thing, that when people talk about the Keystone Pipeline, they talk about the jobs lost and how detrimental that was to so many different families. Not only that, but when he revoked the permit, that really did, create some tensions with the companies that we're working with and the countries that this was dealing with, Canada. So there's a lot more to it than just gas. Okay. But let's take a look at this. Keystone Pipeline canceled after Biden had permit blocked. The sponsor of the Keystone XL crude oil pipeline said Wednesday it is pulling the plug of the contentious project after Canadian officials failed to persuade President Joe Biden to reverse his cancellation of its permit on the day he took office. Calgary-based TC Energy said it would work with government agencies to ensure a safe termination of and exit from the partially built line, which was to transport crude oil from the oil sand fields of Western Canada to Steel City, Nebraska. Construction on the 1,200-mile pipeline began last year when former President Donald Trump revived the long-delayed project after it had stalled under the Obama administration. It would have moved up to 830,000 barrels, that's 35 million gallons, of crude oil daily, connecting in Nebraska to other pipelines that feed oil refineries on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Let's see. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau objected to the move, but officials in Alberta, where the line originated, expressed disappointment in recent weeks that he didn't lobby harder to reinstate the pipeline's permit. Alberta invested more than $1 billion in the project last year, kickstarting construction that has stalled amid determined opposition to the line from environmentalists and Native American tribes along its route. Feel the way you want, but whether it's going through certain lands or, oil running over the land, it honestly, I can understand opposition to this. Don't get me wrong. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. Number one, from my understanding, sending oil through a pipeline like this is significantly safer and less, environmentally impactful as through ship or whatnot, where there can be spills of just massive amounts that this can't even get close to touching the amounts, because they can shut off the line at certain points and whatnot, I guess. But going through the lands, I understand that too. It breaks my heart that that's something that we're doing, but obviously there's conversations to be had about that. I'm not a heartless guy. I get all that. But I will say that on day one, just canceling that and those people losing their jobs. And like I was arguing with somebody else the other day, not arguing, but, arguing my point is that not only did those people just lose their jobs, they had no alternative right off the bat to go to. The Biden administration, psaki, they came out and said, oh, well, they can get clean energy jobs when they become available, but they're not available yet, right? Those clean energy jobs in those people's neck of the woods are not available yet. So, they're out of a job, and an entire, community is out of tens of thousands of people not working. So anyways, a lot of beef about that. Again, this goes on. Let's see. Let's take a look at this. So where does our oil come from? When we start talking about our oil being imported, you got to understand we import a lot of it, right? When Trump was in office, we became energy independent. We were pumping our own fuel and pumping on our lands that Biden, through executive order, he canceled all that. But prices were going down. significantly under that model, under that plan, and it created a reserve, which Biden is now tapping into, from my understanding, that Trump created. You're welcome. The presidents will always blame the other one, but never give him credit for anything. So, so he created a reserve just because of, a disaster situation. And we've kind of gotten into that where we're relying on somebody else for prices. But why are we doing that? Where is the oil coming from? Right here in Statista, it shows import volume of crude oil and petroleum products from Russia into the United States from July 2020 to October 2021. So this shows in in thousands of barrels, and then so you're talking what 26,000 what was that, 26 million? I guess that'd be barrels in May. I don't know. It's a lot. And there's more here a little bit. But yeah, so we're getting a lot of oil from Russia. Remember last week in our show, we were talking about how the entire House, Congress, Senate's, whatever, that everybody was, I say everybody, a lot of them were accusing Trump of being in bed with Russia. But as we saw last week, and as we're kind of sort of painting a picture this week, Biden kind of seems to be in bed with Russia a little bit more. Getting a lot of oil from them, eliminating our own supplies, eliminating jobs that are working on those. What else was it? The pipeline from them to Germany, bypassing Ukraine, leaving them out of the deal, hurting them, or whatever it is. It's not looking good there. So let's go just a little bit further here. What else we got going on? The Fed to signal rate hike as it launches risky inflation fight. With inflation punishing consumers and threatening the economy, the Federal Reserve this week will likely signal its intent to begin raising interest rates in March for the first time in 3 years. The Fed's challenges will get only harder from there. Among the central bank officials, there is a broad support for a rate increase, one that would come much sooner than the officials had expected just a few months ago. But after that, their policy making will become more complicated and could sow internal divisions, especially as a number of new officials join the Fed. How many times, for example, should the Fed raise rates this year? When should it start shedding its enormous stockpile of bonds? A move that would contribute to tighter credit. And how should the Fed respond if inflation eases later this year, as many officials expect? Yet, still remains far above its 2% annual target. So again, inflation, not only the fuel is going up, and we talked about it too, it's just kind of repetitive here, but in our last probably couple of shows, we talked about how we are feeling the pinch of the inflation, right? Your bacon is costing more. Your eggs are costing more. Your gas is costing more. Your electricity may or may not be costing more. If you're using gas, it's certainly costing more to fuel the house, natural gas. Whatever. There's inflation on just about everything that we spend money on right now. They're printing more money, so it's devaluing the dollar. They're about to raise interest rates for the first time in 3 years. It's not a game where the middle and lower class win. And again, I think it was 2 weeks ago in our show. You can go check it out if you hadn't already. Highly recommend it. But it was 2 weeks ago or so, we were talking about how the media is trying to trick you into thinking that inflation is good for us, or that inflation is a good thing, or that you should be more grateful for the economic boom that we're experiencing. I don't know too many people calling it a boom, and I don't know too many people that are enjoying it. And then one of the other things they said is that this impacts the 1% more than it impacts us. It doesn't. As we saw in articles, even though they may spend more on food and going out and gas and whatnot like that, the percentage of their overall income spent is significantly less than our percentage spent on a daily, weekly, monthly basis on these necessities. So it is just not the same. let's look on. One of the other successes of the Biden year is Afghanistan, right? And Taliban going in there and taking over from us. So this right here isn't really a specific article. I just wanted to pull up some of the headlines here from just nonstop here. Change to aid rules needed to prevent famine in Afghanistan, says UK experts. Human rights this fortnight in pictures, kill the bill. And period protests, human rights this fortnight in pictures. Taliban delegation traveled to Norway for human rights talks, which is interesting. The Taliban is trying to participate in these talks, right? And then Taliban launched raids on homes of Afghan women's rights activists. I'm losing my skills. Female boxer who was an Afghan national team. Taliban hates us. A former senior female police officer. Afghan female MPs fight for their country in exile. In Kabul, there's no justice. The female student who fled to Pakistan. Gunmen were looking for my mom, daughter of Afghan ex-radio boss. We've been forgotten. The British embassy security guard in Kabul. And then it goes on and on. So, one of the other things that Biden's getting a lot of criticism for is, of course, his pullout game from Afghan. What's his name? Daddy Duggar from the 17,000 kids and counting has a better pullout game than Joe Biden does. One of the things when he was running for president, and I forget who it was that said it, said that he has never been right one time on any foreign affair situation. And this is one of those situations where it was proven right. And he just seems to be pushing our allies away and bringing in our enemies a little bit more closely than I have seen others do recently. Again, that's just my opinion right there. All I can do is share these articles, share these stories, show you where our gas is coming from and where we've eliminated it from, who we're buddying up with, and who we're pushing away. It does kind of paint a picture a little bit. Just a few more here. Biden sets another record at the southern non-border. I like the way they put that from the New York Post. Drowned out by all the Team Biden disasters, the southern border remains porous. Last month was the worst December on record. A Customs and Border Protection reports 178,840 illegal migrants apprehended, beating the worst previous December by over 100,000. Now, if you'll remember, Biden was a big proponent in pushing for no borders or, path to citizenship or people coming to this country. And the border just got overwhelmed as soon as he became president. And this is really his doing. He can try to pass the buck, and Kamala can try to pass the buck, but it's really them. And I don't know if she's yet to be at the border, even though she's in charge of all that. The only White House strategy here, in other words, is to try keeping the crisis out of the headlines. Yep. While sending as few illegal crossers as possible home. And never mind the joke of Vice President Kamala Harris's mission to tackle the supposed root causes, see what I was saying, in the Southern Triangle nations, which are actually providing a shrinking share of the surge, as the news that you'll likely get away with it spreads across Latin America and Caribbean. And again, that article goes on. It blows my mind. We're talking about sending 8,500 troops to the border of Russia and Ukraine to protect Ukraine, but yet we're not doing anything to protect our own borders. And the men and women that are down there right now are consistently begging for more help, more aid. I remember when they were getting criticized. Remember for the horses, when they were down there and they had the ropes that were not whips. I don't know what you call them, but they were wrangling their horses. And Biden and everybody said they were beating colored folks and stuff down there. And it just simply wasn't true. And that's pretty much the last you heard about the border. The border's not in the news anymore, just like this said. And there's a reason for that. They don't let people visit the cages that the Obama administration built. Obama Biden. They don't let I think they're trying to keep senators and everybody away from there too. It's a big old mess, and they're trying to keep it out of the headlines. Why? Because it is not promising. Here's another good one from the the black enterprise. And I'm reading this specifically for a reason, and I'll get into that. President Biden promised to lower black unemployment. A year into his term, that promise is unfulfilled. A year ago, the Biden administration pledged to focus on the black unemployment rate, but a year into his term, the black workforce is still lacking. Before the pandemic hit, the black unemployment rate was 6%, double the rate as white Americans. At the height of the pandemic, the black unemployment rate hit 16.7%. The U.S. unemployment rate has steadily declined over the last year as vaccines were released and Americans began to return to offices. However, black Americans were laid off more and hired less through the entire pandemic. Today, the gap between black and white workers remain as large as ever. And it goes on. So a couple of things to that. Number one, I don't see the stats, the facts being shared where they're showing that it's because of racism necessarily. That the black, females are even less. I think it says down here, black females specifically are being impacted even more than anybody in this conversation here. But yeah, so here's the thing. There's a ton of jobs out there. A lot of people aren't taking the jobs just because they're making enough money from the government. They don't have to work for some folks. With some of them, they're not paying enough that they want to trouble themselves with that job. And it's really a buyer's market, so to speak, right now with all the job openings that there are out there. So a lot of people aren't returning to work that can return to work. So that could be some of this. And there could be some other issues going on that need to be looked into. But to the point of the writer here, who is Derek Major, Biden was the one that came out and said,
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
But yet here we are. Trump said something kind of similar, I guess, when he was running for office the first time. I think he said, what do you have to lose? Take a chance on them. And under Trump, black unemployment was the lowest it's ever been. In fact, and we'll get into this in a minute, every unemployment category and job creations and everything were the best they were under Trump, all the way up through 2019. This pandemic of unknown virus of unknown origin or whatever came and changed the world. You can't blame, and this is what they did do. They blamed Trump for all of this, right? And they looked at his 2020 numbers. Was that right? 2020 numbers. Yeah. And not his 2019 numbers. And we're going to get in that in a minute too. But that's not fair because the pandemic came. No one can control the pandemic. And even though Biden and others said that it was his fault and a lot of what's going on is his fault and he didn't react right and all this and that, clearly neither is Biden or his administration, because we are worse off now. There are more cases, more deaths, more unemployment under him than there was under Trump. Now they're going to try to say, no, there's not. And we got more jobs created than ever in history. That's not entirely true. In fact, listen to Psaki over here.
Okay. All right. Did this a little bit better this time? Okay. Just have a couple of items for all of you at the top. I have a bit of a hard out at 1/4 or 10 of, so we'll get around to as many people as possible. I know that many of you are tracking that we are about to reach our 1-year mark here in the administration, and we just wanted to note a couple of the points of progress that have been made that you'll hear the president talk more about and members of our administration also talk more about over the coming days. And you know how we love charts around here? So we have some charts that lay out a pretty stark contrast between where we started and where we are now. So just to highlight a couple of pieces. During the president's first year, we saw the most dramatic change in our economy of anywhere in the world. It was the biggest year of job growth in American history, and it was the direct result of actions taken by President Biden and Democrats in Congress, including the American Rescue Plan. The vaccination effort, it helped fund, and now the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you can see the economic data there quite starkly. I mean, look at the initial unemployment claims. They're on average, they were at 812,000 a year ago. They're now at 210,000. The unemployment rate and obviously job creation the year before the president took office and the last year. As it relates to COVID, If we look to a year ago, only 1% of adults were fully vaccinated. 74% of adults are fully vaccinated now. In terms of at-home tests on the market, now we've talked about tests a lot, 0 on the market a year ago. Now we have 375 million people per month, or tests are distributed, I should say, per month. 46% of schools were open a year ago, now over 95%. This is progress that's been made. Obviously, there's more work that's going to be done, that needs to be done. The job is not done yet, but we have a plan to address the challenges we're facing, and we're going to stay at it.
All right, forget for just a second that I have zero belief that they have a plan. The chart is wrong. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, I will say I normally have a thing for redheads, but not this one so much. No. But what was up with the sign language chick? Sorry, I try to run a classy show. Couldn't help it. All right, so let's look at that chart. All right, so we check it out here. 1 year ago, so at the beginning of 2021, right in the heat of the pandemic coming on. So I don't think we were even in the Delta variant yet. So we were still in the weeds with this whole virus just really getting kicked off and get going, because it didn't really hit jobs and hit families until, what was it, summer or so 2019, when it got hard and heavy. I know we started locking down and doing things earlier, but you really started to see the grind then, and then the vaccines rolling out shortly before the elections, I want to say. So these aren't exactly fair numbers to point out. Even more so, if we're looking at the initial unemployment claims, yes, the initial unemployment claims were more then than they are now, but I would really be interested to see, and I don't have those numbers. Again, I do apologize for that, but I don't have the numbers on ongoing unemployment claims. I would imagine that they're probably greater now than they were then, just because more and more people have gotten on unemployment, not because of, it was more at one time then versus one time now. How many have we pulled back into employment? And they do go on to show this. Unemployment rate was 6.4% when he came into office. It's 3.9% now. The jobs created the year before, so you're talking 2020. In 2020, there were a loss of 9.4 million jobs. And then this past year, they created 6.4 million jobs. So negative 9.4 plus 6.4. You know what that means? We're still 3 million in the hole. So it's not jobs being created, it's jobs coming back. Okay? Don't let the numbers fool you. The numbers are there. Okay? This is remedial math. If we lost, let me pull it back up again. If we lost 9.4 million and yet we're showing that we gained 6.4 million, there is still a difference of 3 million. We are still not out of the hole yet. Understand that that's what that means. Okay. They didn't create an additional on top of. So when they word things like we created this many jobs, or it's the biggest boom of jobs ever, they're lying to you. That's what they do. And you can look at things like that. Their own table. They love tables so much. You can look at that. You can pull up other statistics to see. They're lying to you. They're manipulating what you think, how you perceive the reality. Okay? Don't let them. You need to go out there and you need to seek the knowledge in multiple places. Not just from them, because they're going to tell you what they want to tell you. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this clip from the Morning Mayhem. Remember, this is just a portion of the full show that comes out every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. If you hadn't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the full shows or these tasty little nuggets.